There we go. As many of your questions as you have, and we can practice like as many problems as we can, because that's one of the best ways to just get better in math. Like the more practice problems you see today, the more problems you'll be ready for tomorrow. And so in the last class we started with, when we got to practice, I just kind of let them practice. And I said, like, you could kind of like chat with your neighbors about freak-out stuff as we went, but I noticed the majority of the conversations started to be not super freak-out focused, so then we had to go to like independent, completely silent practice for the rest of the time, okay? So I want you to watch your conversations, just like check yourself as you're doing things today, because in general, this quiz was challenging for a lot of you guys. A lot of people struggled, so we're going to talk about it, and I did like curve it some to take care of you, so even if you're looking at the numbers here and you're like, oh, okay, I did all right. We don't know kind of what the story is going to be for the unit exam for curving, so I want you to just make sure you're still doing your best and getting as much practice as you can to make sure you're fully prepared, okay? So, unit exam tomorrow and Thursday, because tomorrow's Wednesday, so we won't be able to finish. So the way I'm going to structure it is tomorrow, you're going to take the basic skills application, and there will be a calculator part, so make sure you have calculators. Because if you don't have it, you're just going to have to do your best without calculator, and that definitely puts you at a disadvantage. On Thursday, then will be all Scantron multiple choice, and there again will be a calc and a non-calculator section of that multiple choice. Okay? So be prepared. That's the structure we'll have for the test. That means if you feel like you need help before that, you're looking at your quiz and you're like, oh, I didn't do so well, and after class today, you're like, I still feel like there's some things I'm confused about. Today after school I'll be here for tutorials, so I know a lot of people are even staying for the big Braves Oaks game, and if you're trying to kill some time before that, come on by and we're going to be practicing, okay? Or even if you're not, just stay after school. For tomorrow, I am also be available today. I worked with some people at lunch, and I'm happy to work with people tomorrow during lunch. And then if anyone really needs tomorrow, even though you will have already taken half of it, if you still want some practice before you get to the multiple choice section, if you'd like me to hang around tomorrow after early dismissal, I can kind of answer questions then too. Okay? And also feel free to email me with any questions you have on problem set and all of those things, because your problem set is also due tomorrow. Okay? So you can use that as a tool to study tonight. Alright, so let's talk quiz about just the different standards that were on your quiz that are going to be on the test again tomorrow, to make sure you know kind of where your grade came from, what are the topics we were learning. So, Standard 3, you see 3 separate grades. Standard 3 is what I call like function definitions and operations. So I basically took all of the topics we learned in Unit 1 and I made like 3 buckets of kind of things that are related. So this first bucket is definitions and operations. So that's anything like evaluating a function and plugging it into a piecewise, solving quadratics, like when you have to do your box method, or you have to do something like the quadratic formula or something like that. Composition of functions, f of g of x stuff, inverse functions, things like that, okay? On your quiz, that was number 1, 4, 7, and part C of the basic skills, if you're wondering, which meant you have a little number that says plus something underneath your score. The best you could have gotten was a +5 on that, and so you can look at your number and see how many you got out of 5 because it was curved, and so that gives you a better idea of like how many points you actually got out of 5. Okay? I'm trying to find where you gave me your quiz. Okay. It's somewhere in here. Hold on. Okay. Next up, function behaviors. Standard 4 has anything to do with like how a function behaves. So, is it even or odd, or is it discontinuous, and types. The end behavior, what a function is doing on the end. Minimums, max, increasing, decreasing, or average rate of change. That was a larger portion of your quiz. That was worth 8 total points because that was problem 5, problem 6, problem 8, and then a large part of your basic skills, part A, B, and D. All of that was those type of problems. Okay? And then the last one, standard 5, was parent functions. So your foldable, those functions, doing transformations or behaviors specifically of those graphs. So like which graph is increasing, things like that. That was problem 2 and 3. And so this one is the only one where your grade is kind of a hard to picture, like in general, how well you're doing. Because it was only a possibility of 2 points. So if you got 1 out of 2, it's kind of hard to tell like how you would do if there were more problems on transformations. But just do the best you can with kind of the data that we have for that, okay? So what I want you to do right now is I want you to look at your scores for these individual 3, and I want you to think right now, because your unit exam is a chance to FA these and to grow. I want you to grow on all of them, but I want you to pick and commit to at least one right now that you can check or star or something that you are going to commit to today during a review. I'm going to have it like 5 standard so that you can focus on specifically that standard. And I still want you to practice from all of the standards, okay? But I want you to at least prioritize one like above the rest, okay? Pick your priority standard that you want to prioritize above the rest. Everyone check off or find theirs that they chose. Standard 3 people. Who wants to improve standard 3? Got a few. Standard 4 people. Standard 5 people. Okay, so everyone should have one. We're kind of all over the board. So that's why today is kind of about you practicing what you need to practice specifically to make sure that you're going to feel comfortable tomorrow. Okay, so before we jump into our differentiated practice, I am going to ask you to step out for a moment, and I'm going to open the floor for, I'm going to limit to just 5 minutes of any specific questions you do have about the quiz that we can talk about. And then I'm going to table the rest of those questions for find me any of those times I said I was available. And we're going to spend the rest of class really focused looking at new problems so we can make sure we just get as much practice as possible. Okay? I don't want to spend the whole class just talking about the quiz. I want to look at some new stuff. Okay? So Lirio, you step out for me for 1 second, and then I'm going to try to get yours so that you can finish. Everyone else, take a look at your quiz and see if there's anything you have. Yeah, but it shouldn't have been a 3-1. You might have put the wrong one inside of the wrong one. Okay, 5 minutes starts now. Raise your hand if you have a specific one. I tried to give you a lot of feedback, like write things on the quizzes, but I had a ton to grade in one night. And so if you were like unclear, you were like, you didn't really explain this, you just circled the right answer. How did you get there? If there's one you want to talk about. Okay, Brian, starting with you.
Number 6.
Number 6. Okay, so everyone flip to 6. Okay, 6 is that like crazy graph that has all the different pieces. Unless I flip on your quiz page to number 6, so we all follow. Okay, cool. First statement says that it has a relative max at 2. So if you go look over here at 2, notice your graph over there does this kind of funky woo thing right here. Do we call this thing a relative max?
Yeah.
Yes. If it was the highest of all high points, it would be an absolute max. But there's other points, see other points like above it. There's like the line up here and stuff. So it's a relative max because it's a place where we go from increasing to decreasing. So that one is true. So statement 1 looks good. 2 is a relative max. Woo! Okay. Next statement says that the average rate of change from -1 to 0.5 is 0. Okay. Average rate of change in general, how do we find it? The slope. Good. Melanie says change in y over change in x. We can kind of think about it like slope. It's a rate of change. And so they give us our x's, right? -1 minus 0.5. Okay. And we can find our y's by using our graph. At -1, what point do we have on our graph if we go up? Find it.
1.
There's an open circle and there's a closed circle. Which one is going to be in? Open means it's not included. It goes up to that point, but it's not included. So it's going to be up here at, so that might be answer your question. It's going to be up here at 2, that closed circle. And so the value here is going to be 2. minus, what about find 0.5? What is it at 0.5? It's also 2. So notice on the top we get 2 minus 2 is 0, and so the rate of change is going to be 0 for that, okay? It is going to be 0 for that, which makes sense because the rate of change, like, is it increasing or decreasing or changing? That's where it's constant and flat. So we'd say the rate of change is 0. So 2 is also true, okay? 3, I had a lot of people that wanted 3 to be right, because it says 3 is a jump discontinuity. Over here at -3, if you look closely, it's actually, if you look back at your study guide, what we call removable discontinuity, because the point is literally removed and placed somewhere else. I don't know where it was. But if it was jump, the two sides would be approaching 2 different values. Okay? So that would be removable, not a jump. You can go look at the pictures on your study guide. Okay? So it was 1 and 2 only. C. No, G. I can't read from here. Any last minute other questions? Check my clocks. We only have 5 minutes on the clock, so. Kennedy, did you have one? Okay. Voices off really quick. We only have. Oh, wait. We only have 1 more minute to kind of review this, but Diego's question was about number 7 with the inverse function. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now, but I will make a suggestion. I noticed in general we tend to struggle, like last year too, no matter what the topic was, people really struggled with these problems where you have to figure out what step they made a mistake or if they did. Because a lot of times it's hard to put yourself in someone else's work and see exactly what they're doing, especially because this person, you're not necessarily seeing everything that they're doing in those steps. You're seeing like at the end of their step kind of what they got. So what we broke down in class, we might have broken it down more than they did. And so if you're not doing some math off to the side of you solving it yourself, a lot of times it's hard to identify where the mistake is, okay? Where did Diego, you think the mistake was that we can kind of like talk about where it was, why it was correct?
I said that step 1 where it had the equation and then it changed from y and x.
Yeah, so a lot of people didn't know where that like yx thing came from, okay? If you off to the side solve this like the ones we practiced in class, what would we do first? Multiply, good, times that minus y minus 1 on both sides, which means I'm multiplying times this quantity y minus 1. And if you're doing this work off to the side, that's why I want you to like put pencil to paper. What would you have to do here to simplify this? Yeah, you'd have to, I heard Brian say, you'd have to distribute this x and say yx minus x equals y plus 7. So it might have looked like that x that he got was like a magical x, like where did it come from? Because he did not show you this step. I'm saying he, I don't know, the girl or boy, I don't know. But you have this, and then you would distribute, and that's where we'd get that, okay? A couple of people thought step 2, because they didn't see again where he got what was there. But that's from, if this is a y and this is a y, remember we wanted to get the y's together and the non-y's together so that we could factor out. And if you subtract y over, and you add the x over to the other side, that's where that next part came from. And then he factors out the y and goes from there. Kennedy. I will, while we're practicing, just come hop in with you and I'll still answer your quiz question, but I'm gonna like release us to more practice. Okay, so here's what I want. I wanna make sure that you don't just practice one standard the entire time. So I've structured this in 2 ways, okay? If you look at this review sheet, okay, there is standard 3, some practice. This is not all of standard 3, this is just one piece of standard 3, but like one practice problem. Standard 4 and standard 5, okay? I want you to start with whichever one you prioritized, okay? But I do want you to complete all 3 of these so that you're still seeing an example of all 3 of them, okay? Once you finish these 3 problems, listen to make sure you know what to do next. Once you finish these 3 problems, I have a key, and you can either check with the key or I'll check you off. And then you get to pick which standard you want to focus on for the rest of class. If you want to focus on like standard 3, or you could mix them up, but if you want to focus on just standard 3, then you can come over here, and there are 4 problems. I have 4 cream folders in here that you can pull one at a time and just work through as many as you can. And the key is taped to the front of the folder so you can check it when you come back to grab another one, okay? If you want to practice standard 4, blue, standard 5, yellow, okay? Or if you want like one of each, you can mix it up every time you come up and try a different one, okay? So you're starting on your paper, then you're coming to these practice problems, starting with whichever one you need the most practice on, okay? I'm going to start by, again, because there's only one of me and there's a lot of you, even though you're working independently on what you need to work on, if you have a question and you think your neighbor might be able to help you and you want to quietly talk about it, you can. But if I hear conversations that are non-pre-cal related and I feel like we're not using our time wisely, then we'll go to like completely independent silent practice, okay? Which is hard because then I'm the only one to answer questions and I'm like running around trying to get to everyone, okay? So for right now, I'll let you, it's okay if you're chatting with your neighbors as you go. Do as many of these as you can. The more practice you get, the better we're going to feel. Go for it. Okay. So talk about why? Okay. In general, again, don't let all of their work. Shiho, can you tell Lara she come back in? Don't you don't want to handle their work, but how do you
Go ahead and timing and
You have to do your box because this you can't pull X out of it. So you have to go here and for his, he uses quadratic formula. You'll get something really similar to him, but it's important to know that you have to do that negative 1 squared. You have to square the negative 1 and the
So for here, it's like what you get for
So f of negative 1, you put it like in the bracket. F of the first thing you do is 1 inside, right?
then
Put that T right here.
the inverse of G. Yeah, so it's 5.
When you solve this, you get Okay, for the opposite, you put an F of 0, and then I put in 0, 3, and then you find G inverse of 0. Now this is G inverse. You're not looking for 0 on this side. G inverse is where X is 0 for 0 here, and what X value would come from. Alright. Very dry. Let me find it.
When
I have it, and then you want to sit in this low stuff or
Hitting my knee right here.
Oh, no. What do you get?
What else is working?
Oh, that, okay, that's
Yeah, it's just saying that there's open a question. I'm saying that there. The key has to walk away and allow me to go farmland.
Do this.
Let's go find key, but, oh no, key.
It looks like it's
How about him?
negative 30.7.
Yep, coming, Brandon.
Amazing.
Yes, except for because this does not have like a square or a number outside.
30.7.
There's nothing you can do to this until you can drop the parentheses, right? We only want the parentheses if like this is like a square. And so if we drop one, we simplify. Okay? So if you can simplify, I want you to simplify. Coming! Yes, sir. Calculator. Sorry. Yes. Calculator to find that average rate. Yes, except I want you to simplify, and if this has parentheses around it, but nothing's being like multiplied or squared or anything like that, that's the same thing as if you just drop your parentheses and say 3x squared minus 4 plus 4, and then you can put the 4, yeah.
I'm not sure if we did this right, but
Good. So now, yep, and now we go to 3 decimal places. You gotta show me all 3. Don't round. You can round at the 3rd, or just write all 3. But I don't want you to give me 2.
what this means, like, it's losing. Oh, okay.
Okay, so you need to now write your sentence with all those 6 things. So you say, well, it depends on what you want to start with, but you say the time interval, the description, increasing or decreasing, average rate, the number you got, and then your units, which is whatever's on top, or whatever we got on the bottom. And you gotta be really careful with this because the units of this are kind of weird. We're gonna talk about it.
Whether the average rate is negative 30.78, which is decreasing.
Decreasing. So you would, then you drop the negative, because remember, we kind of talked about like a rate could be like a velocity, like we don't say we're having a negative 14 miles per hour, we say it's like decreasing by that much. But in here for the description, I don't want you to just tell me the average rate of change is, I want you to say like what you were describing to me earlier, like the rate water is leaving the pool is decreasing at an average rate like that. Cool?
Do you understand, sir?
Yes.
The water?
Oh, subtract it and then plug it in? Okay, what we want to do is change y or change x, so but you want to plug in and find r of 2 and r of 7.5. You want to plug in them separately, and then what you get is what you're going to subtract on the top. Over on the bottom, you'll have 7.5 or 7.5 minus 2. Yes, sir. Yes, negative means reflect. Negative on the outside means reflect. Think of outside, like if I add on the outside, I go up and down. So negative on the outside means it flips up and down. Negative on the inside,
You're Asian, right? So these are
like
smart
on the
people.
quiz, just like things on the inside, they go left and right, that flips from this way to now this way.
They think it was easy, that's why.
It's gonna go down. Yep, so it's gonna be cute. You already plugged it in. This is F. And your F.
What's the division? Division?
Your G. You already did G. So you're done.
Divided by 2?
Like this is all highlighted for you.
You go up the season. But can you, they've been good this year, right?
Inside of the bigger G is just nothing.
Now you want to talk about
So you have F, like think of this.
We're not on that one.
You have F. And all.
Tattoos. Or tattoos.
And you did. Because you have the plus 4, like, you think this is like a box? No, what did you put in the box? 3x squared minus 4, you plug it in.
It surpassed.
So yeah, a couple people feel like they need to like plug in again.
That's in here, remember?
They did it two separate. But here, you could have if you wanted, but people just don't like it. So could have said you X, so keep this X, then you would have taken this, put it in there.
That's not you, that's not.
And then you could have thought of this X as negative 2. And done it like all steps combined. It would have
It's just a shirt that it's like so small.
So that's what you're basically doing here. Lovely, that's fine. So now you just need to make sure. Brandon, and you guys just try to find another one really quick, and then I've got you on my radar and coming to you next. So you can come next, probably up here. Come,
Maybe it had
baby.
time. So maybe it had time.
And the keys up here. Can I see the keys?
They had a little
And then here's the keys.
I got number 8 for the first one.
Why?
All of these things.
You can grab it F.
There's 2 pink ones.
Right when the negative is pointed out.
The keys, and then when you're done, next problem. And all of these things. So you have to say from 2 to 7.5 minutes.
On the inside, that makes it go
Hey, what are we talking
outside,
about
it makes
here?
it go
What's the situation that we're involved in? The rate of water leaving the pool decreasing at an average rate of 30.728, and then our units are pretty weird here because it's whatever's on the top or whatever's on the bottom. Well, what's on the top already has a word. It's gallons per minute on the top and minutes on the bottom. So you end up with this weird gallons per minute. It's got like 2 per minutes because it's the rate of something that was already a rate. Okay, cool. So write that out. You'll definitely have to do those, and then you'll make sure you have them. Coming. So did you have a question or you just want to practice? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Try to pick these up because I gotta go cover next to Yep. Leo, keep practicing. Okay. These ones? Okay. So this one plus 4. On the inside, I agree with left and right, but what is on the inside is the opposite of what you have. Plus 4 is actually back 4, and minus 4 is forward 4. So same thing, but over there. Okay? It'll face the same way unless there's a negative, because that means it's reflected. If it's facing a different way, it's also reflected some way, and that means there'd be a negative. But you don't have a negative on the inside and the outside. So it's going to face the same way over there. Okay? For this one, you get a negative. So this one will reflect, but we got to figure out whether it reflects to face this way or whether it reflects to face down. And that depends on whether the negative is on the inside or the outside. Inside will reflect side to side. So on your quiz, this one reflected, it was inside the negative. See how it went from there to here?
It's early to tell.
And it went up 2, so the negative's on the inside.
Until like week
This
8.
one, the negative's on the outside. Things on the outside go up and down. So it would reflect it to now looking like this. Think about it, it's the same as, like, see how plus 4 was on the inside, so it went left to right? A negative on the inside goes left to right. See how this minus 1 is on the outside? That's going to shift it up or down. Just like a negative is going to reflect it up and down. So this will go 2 forward, one down, so the minus 1, and then instead of facing up like this, it's going to go down like this, and then reflected from up to down because of the negative. Okay? Is that coming? I gotta get
You're smart. They're asking you for the average. Yeah, they're asking for 3 minutes, so you plug these 2 minutes into here. Yeah, you plug 2 minutes into T squared because that's the minutes. Instead of 45 minutes in here also. So you plug this in for another the answer. You find it right. Just the difference over 2 minus 7.
It will require so it looks like this, now it goes like this, down below. On the inside, things on the inside go left, right, so it's just
Alright, I got those two. I got
that's
that
what I'm
2
saying,
minutes
negatives work the
instead of
same
45
way.
minutes.
So a negative,
You're gonna
we'll take it on the
solve
outside, up and down.
Okay, you're gonna plug 2 into this equation, and then once you get that, you'll get this. And then next you're gonna
This
plug
negative
7
on
45
the
minutes into the equation.
inside,
And then after that,
turn
you're
this
gonna
from facing this
find the
way
difference.
to facing this way.
This 2
And
over
then it went up 2.
2.
Okay.
And then you gotta put
Where this one is on the outside, and so it's not gonna face it this way. It's gonna flop it down.
You gotta learn, bro.
And then it's gonna go.
Copy, you learn everything by cheating.
No,
Ask people relationships.
Okay, here you gotta do like this. The top is already your rate, so like this is gallons per minute, they gave you a rate, and then we found the rate of that rate. So you'll actually get gallons per minute.
What's your done?
The rate of a rate. Because you're gonna always be the top or the bottom. So in this case, it's gallons per minute. But other than that, your system's great, everything's good. Okay, Nanthia, let me see.
The first one looks like that. The first one, you got this one.
Yes.
What's the like the
That's been b, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 and ac, all equals 2.
Dad.
¿Cómo es 8? Está sumando 2.
Oh, okay.
That way.
So he plugged it in correctly. Switch x and y and then solve for y. Okay? So he plugged it all in correctly, but then when he did
You look like that. What?
Okay, doesn't matter which one comes first. This, I guess my different but doesn't matter which one. He did first. Here. This one? Two.
Yeah, blue one.
So choose one. Correct? Because, so it doesn't matter which one goes first, but it's, this is the one you started with, and that came from 2, so you need to go first on the bottom. If you would have started with this one, that's fine, but then you would need to start with 7.5. Okay, mine can't be done on this one, we should be doing under the.
Your control dog. Wait, how did you move?
You don't add. Sorry, we gotta say.
Alright, y'all, be focused if you haven't started moving on to the next problem.
10? Oh, no. 10 4 we got. Yeah, 10.
Okay. Te estoy diciendo.
I see you.
Yeah, so look, so this is negative b, so y, so y,
Cuando plug in this,
you have the negative 2.
so negative 2.
Alright.
Para 1 de ellos,
How you doing?
Dave.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just.
Someone's there, right in the back. I think I got. Hold on. How are we doing? How are we doing with proof? Like even on. Did we get that on the quiz? Because I wanted to know. Okay, so this is like an explanation by proof. You've got to show either this or the other one for even. Okay? So you can, I'll show you right now, and then you can also go back and look at your problem set, because on that problem set, I gave you 1 point for saying it was odd, the other one didn't. Okay? So, you're gonna start, whether it's even or odd, both of them have f of negative x. So you're gonna start by writing f of negative x equals, Martin, Brian, Diego, focus. Equals, negative on the inside, f of negative x. Good, equals, okay. If I plug that in here, you get 1 over, and instead of having x on the bottom, you have negative x on the bottom, right? Okay. This does not have like a squared or something like that. If it was squared, the negative would become a positive. Okay, this cube would stay negative. This doesn't have anything, so it's clearly going to stay negative, right? If I have a positive divided by a negative, so that's going to be positive divided by negative. Negative. So this is the same thing as just having the negative, like out front, right? Like 1 divided by negative is the same thing as negative. So you can just write the negative out front, which means f of negative x is equal to negative, and what is this? It's our original f of x. So you just showed that you have your original function, but just with a negative in front. That is the definition of odd. If it was even, the negative would go away, like x squared is even. Yes, but again, if you just explain that, so you need to
exact same result as negative 2x. Yeah. And for odd, that's something like cubic, like that. So it's like, yeah, so if you take 3 and then if you take 3 and flip it down, it's the same y value.
We're not just solving the average rate, we're finding the average rate of something. And in your specific, you need to say like the average rate of water, something like that, okay? And then this is always divided by the bottom. So it should always be something over something. Okay, and that's usually like what it looks like, but this one's actually weird, that's why I said be careful. Because this whole top thing was actually already gallons per minute. It wasn't gallons on the top and minutes on the bottom. It was gallons per minute on the top and minutes again on the bottom. So it's actually gallons per minute, which is weird. But think about it, it's the rate of a rate. Like I started with a rate and then I found the average rate of change of that. So I'm taking the rate of a rate. So I took my rate and I divided by minutes again. So I per minute. So I would always write units like my units and my top, my units and my bottom. So that you can write your units. How are we doing? Coming. Have we done any of the extra problems yet? Because I would power through these. There's only 3 out of a lot of different problems. So once we finish these and look at them, there's like 12 more practice problems out here. Do you remember? Do you have one of these? Okay. This one, when we're actually taking it from looks like this. And then if I add 4, for example, that's actually up. So it's going to be the same thing, but instead of doing it 0, Your little middle. Where your new middle point is.
What is it short? What is it trade-offs?
It's okay.
Everything that you give up.
What's your more what is causation?
And the other one's gonna be like,
Causation, I mean, correlation is not even causation.
you don't touch it.
Kind of, yeah. That was hard for me.
So for this one, you'll have to do three, and then this one.
Yeah. You've been to economics already, right?
Es obvio que me voy para allá porque no tiene casi ni verga, güey.
No, well, first of all, you just doing words that someone agree or someone disagree. And like, you know, like math, you have like, yeah, goes to one. Then at the end, it tells you that makes you
If there's not one problem, then you don't write, you write this. Like it would have to be a. Yeah, I know. These are all. And this is the points are, and then you.
If it's inside a square root, it's the opposite. If it's inside a square root, it's the opposite. Like this. Like x plus 4. Yeah. Everything inside a square root is the opposite.
Okay, y'all, super focused. You've got 5 minutes of practice left to ask me questions. Try to do another problem. If you have not gotten to these extra practice problems, then you need to kick it into gear and try to do about 2 more problems before we get out of here if you're still on your first sheet.
Your sister's easy. Thanks.
So what's your mind? Kick it into gear. Because that's the increment of the point where it goes from No, for increase, meaning increasing the higher x values. Okay. You start on the inside, see what I find. G inverse means the opposite for your x's and y's. Which means this is not an x, this is a y, and what's your x value? -2. So this inside thing is -2. So you want f of -2. Let's write that down. Good, that's what this whole thing was, right? And f of -2, this is your f, you should be able to find f of -2 by just putting in -2. Cool?
Did you do the last one?
Yeah, that's what you got.
Oh, yeah. So
Once you get a problem, try to scoot out of the way so
that was a good shape, right? You got a big. It's good to have big.
How you doing? Practice, got a question? Okay, once Brian asked me.
Already? Things even good. That's too much money, man. That's so much.
Okay, so whenever we found domain restrictions, there's 2 things we
Where
have
does
to watch
that
out
mean
for.
coming back from practice squad? Yeah, like
Here on the bottom of it,
in Texas, they brought their tight end from the practice squad.
negative under square root, so notice that's the square root. So we have to make sure that thing inside the square root is not negative. How do we find where something's negative? We have to said that it's here to find like the negative thoughts.
I know JJ Watt can play tight end.
The 2x, what is it?
Yeah, that's what it, then,
When I said equals 0, I find that it's negative 3.
Basically, get a broken ring.
Negative plug in the number over here, like negative 8. You plug that in.
Oh, do we use
You
it?
get a negative 57 square root of negative back. If I plug in the number here, like 1, 2 times 1 is 2 plus 3 is positive.
He got in the Jaguars game.
Negative 3 over 2, so I'm finished. Alright, if everyone can take a seat, I'm gonna make last closing announcements and get you out of here on time. Last closing announcements. Can you guys start passing up? I gotta go cover my next class period, so can you pass up these red folders so I can put them in this bin and get out of here quickly? Alright, tomorrow, as soon as you get here, we will be jumping into our application and basic skills. So come ready to go with your calculator so we can get started quickly. Tonight, email me with questions as you're working through your problem set or any of these extra practice problems. And come talk to me after school as well if you get a chance and want help on something. What? When do they end? Probably like about 5:30 or 6. Like, she's gonna have to survive today. Yes, that's big business. This room, but I usually have time to make periods, so it's around 4:50. Oh, I'm not here right now. Alright, y'all. Kevin, can you go push the button? Kevin. Oh, thank you. You're done? You're turning in? Okay. Oh, that's
Who that?